Welcome back to the Love Energetics podcast. This is the space for those who are ready to reach their full potential in life and consciously create their highest timeline. We're going deep into the laws of the universe, mastering manifestation, self-love, self-image, intuition, how to literally reach maximum fulfillment and have it all, because you do not have to chase and you do not have to settle and you do not have to shrink. The Love Energetics podcast is because unconditional love is the highest frequency that you can vibrate at. So it's literally the source, universe, God frequency. So while you're here, you can always expect the highest frequency information that is going to give you the greatest life upgrades. And with that, my name is Marea. I'm a conscious creation coach and a trained intuitive energetic healer. And I am here to help you accelerate into your dream life at the fastest, most fulfilling way possible. So if you are ready to become your highest self and lock in to your highest, luckiest, most abundant, fulfilling, successful timeline, then this is the space for you. So let's get into today's podcast episode. All right, guys, it is my first time filming in a little bit. So if you saw my last episode, it was really actually just a 6-minute source channeled transmission more than anything. It was not a video. It was actually just a voice memo that I had recorded for myself because I get a lot of really great ideas when I run, and I thought it was just really great to share that with other people because the theme of acceptance and surrender and how to balance taking aligned action but also not forcing things, that has been such a big theme in the collective. So I did just drop like a quick 6-minute transmission. If you just want like a quick hit of inspiration, then definitely check that one out. This is going to be back to my longer format. These usually run around an hour long. So that is what we have in store today. And I'm actually bringing back a dating love life episode. So woohoo, we haven't done one of those in a while, but I felt it was time to bring this one back. I actually have we're not really going too deep on a lot of notes here. If you're watching this on video, I have like a cute little mind map of how I am breaking down a lot of different concepts today, because that's just how my mind works. I have so many different things and how they intertwine and are related to each other. And the reason I was inspired to do this podcast is because I have learned a lot, I would say, about relationships over the last 7 years since I started getting into the spirituality manifestation world. You guys know, if you watched, or listened to the first 5 episodes of the Love Energetics podcast, it is all about how I healed my love life, transformed my love life through self-love and self-image work, and manifested my soulmate, who is my husband, as you guys know. So I did my first few podcast episodes about that, but what I came to realize is that the reason I entered the spiritual world was the motivation behind it was because I wanted to have a more fulfilling love life and, create my divine union. That was always the draw that got me into the spiritual world. And I think that if you are somebody that is in the spiritual world, you can relate that there is something in your life that you just really, really wanted and you could not figure out. And that's what motivated you to get into the spiritual world. Granted, it is very intentionally designed by your higher self. And if you're curious to learn more about your higher self, kind of interchangeable with your soul self on a certain level, you can listen to that podcast episode. It's a few podcast episodes back. But going back on this topic, right, I did a lot of podcast episode topics about love and relationships and how it intertwined with laws of the universe and manifestation and all of that, and self-love, self-image, all of that kind of stuff. But then I kind of broke away from it a little bit, especially I was getting married last year, but I also had a deeper spiritual awakening round 2 last year where I really, really got to more of the advanced mastery type of levels of how the universe works and really just understanding everything from start to finish. And with that came a lot of new lessons, a lot of new realizations, and a lot of new levels of embodiment when it comes to love, relationships, and dating. And I would say, in addition to that, as I am really kind of getting my strides on my signature coaching style, if you have worked with me before, right, I do one-on-one coaching sessions where previously when I first started out, I typically would help women manifest their soulmate. That has since really expanded to more becoming your highest self, reaching your full potential, and just more of like a conscious creation of your dream life. I didn't want to solely focus on love and relationships because I realized that there was so much more to life once I manifested my soulmate that I wanted to learn, and just really exploring what true fulfillment is. It's not just relationship, right? It's not just your love life. So I didn't want to really be imbalanced with my perception in life and how I helped others. So I've since really expanded that, especially now that I'm a trained intuitive, and I have a variety of different spiritual gifts that I've trained, that I've naturally had, but have really trained and opened up to be at a more advanced, accurate, precise level. Just like, an athlete would have maybe some natural gifts and they would train to be the best of the best in their field. That is the path that I am on. And so as I become more in tune with my intuitive gifts and just expanding all of my knowledge and skill sets, I bring that into my one-on-one client sessions. So if you're ever a one-on-one client of mine, you are always getting hot off the press, the best of the best skill sets and work from me. And this is part of the reason that I wanted to bring back a dating episode. This topic is going to be all about high frequency dating. And the reason for that is because what I noticed, and you'll kind of have a little preview of this from the interview I did with Talia, one of my best friends who did a 6-month coaching session transformation with me, was we originally started off our coaching to help her manifest her soulmate. And then we ultimately realized for her, it wasn't even about love. Like, that's what drew her into the spiritual work, to do personal development on herself, do a lot of inner healing and self-love and self-image work. And while she did find that relationship, it was about so much more than that. And so she's unlocking so much more happiness and fulfillment and just overall excitement for her life because of this work. So it's about so much more than love. And what happened, what I started to realize, is that the more one-on-one clients I started to work with, I started to realize that it wasn't just her, right? It was a lot of the women that were drawn to me in my work and wanting to work with me were women like past versions of myself that were really drawn to the spiritual manifestation, personal development type of world because of a guy in their life, a relationship in their life, or maybe it was multiple relationships, or it was one specific person. But I have found that a lot of the women that I tend to work with, similarly to me, had some type of relationship, love life thing that they struggled with, that they sought out manifestation, spirituality type of stuff for. So it had me really get this intuitive pull to have an episode about high frequency dating information. I've been inspired on a couple topics from the one-on-one clients I've been working with over the last 6 to 8 months. I've really been seeing a lot of themes that I think are important to share at this time. So I want to talk about 3 main topics today in this episode. And it's going to be about, the first thing is high frequency dating advice. So there is so much low frequency dating advice. Dating in this day and age has become extremely toxic. It was also toxic when I was in the dating world. So why dating is toxic AF in modern times? Really, was it ever not? I don't know. So one of the main topics we're going to talk about is why dating is toxic AF. I'm also going to talk about, what do we really want in relationships as humans? Not what do we want as women? What do we want as men? No, like on a human level, we are the same. And I'm going to explain what that means and why you should want to hear this, because something I have learned too, the deeper I go into consciousness work, really understanding the way the human brain thinks and why we think the way that we do, and just going to higher levels of thinking, really understanding human behavior, why we do the things we do, why we think the way that we do. A lot of times we want something, but we're not directly clear on the actual desire of why we want it. We want things because of how we think it's going to make us feel, but a lot of times we're not making the right subconscious connections to be like, okay, I'm going after this because of X, and we actually think we're going after something for one reason, but we're subconsciously going after it for a different reason. And I'm going to go into that deeper, but it's really, really important if you are going to be someone, whether you are single or in a relationship, or even if you are married, like this is for anybody who wants to have a more higher frequency love life, a more passionate, more fulfilling love life that is really, I would say, fulfilling and passionate, but also not in the toxic way, right? In a balanced, loving, amazing way, the unconditional love way, right? Like I was talking about. So that's the second topic. And then I just want to give a little bit more of like the spiritual truth on relationships. Like relationships are so much more than I think we realize. I think in society, it's all like, okay, find a man or find a woman and, you know, you've got to get married and have kids and you just need to live your life with them for the rest of your life. Like it's a very much flat description of why we're in relationships as humans, and we don't realize there's so many more things that make relationships so important for us on a spiritual level, a mental level, an emotional level, a physical level, and just an overall growth and expansion type of thing, whether that's spiritual or just life in general. So we really need to talk about that, because I do not see this stuff talked about enough. And if I knew all these things that I know now, if I knew them back then, like I would not have gone through all of the trials and tribulations that I have gone through. And ultimately my goal on this podcast is to share things that I've learned, mistakes that I've made, things that I wish I knew back then, so that I could have the life that I want, the dream life that I want, without going through as much hardship, as much struggles, going to those dead ends and having to rework my life, and, you know, just make it much more of a clear and direct path for you guys, and help you guys excel even more with this information, ultimately, is the goal, and just have a more fulfilling, amazing life. Okay, so let's start with the first topic of why dating has become toxic. Let's start out with the fact that the dating advice out there is extremely low frequency. It is lack based, it is scarcity based, and it is just not rooted in an abundance type of mindset. It is not rooted in approaching things from a loving way. So part of my path and things that have really fascinated me was, one, relationships and love life. I always wanted to understand, you know, why some men were really drawn to certain women and why they weren't drawn to others. And yeah, this was based on my personal life, like just even thinking back to like my first love, the guy that I dated in high school. I always felt like I didn't measure up, and I always felt like I was not really his first choice, and I was very insecure, and I always felt like, you know, why choose me? And I was always worried that he was going to like someone more than me and things like that. Like I had so many insecurities, and, you know, obviously my first love was a big heartbreak thing for me. And so what I started to do is, I loved psychology. I took my first psychology course in high school. I took AP Psych, which is like whatever the advanced level. And I decided to major in psychology for my college degree. And that is what really drove me from like a passionate perspective with school. I never really enjoyed school, but I loved psychology. And so with that, I always was very fascinated by what makes people tick, why people do the way things that they do, why people feel the way that they feel, who's drawn to who, things like that. And so I became fascinated growing up. I've always been a lover girl. Like I always loved love. I always was fantasizing about the day that I would meet my person and everything would fall into place, right? Like, which I'll explain a little bit more around why women care about that so much, like way more than we realize. So there's another really important piece about why a lot of us women feel like we need a relationship to complete us. So I am going to go into that later in this episode. I just want to finish this piece first, and then I'm going to go into that shortly after. So with that fascination, I was always looking for dating advice, like how to be more magnetic, how to get the guy, like all of that stuff. And it is mainly treated like a game. That is the dating advice that we are given and taught how to operate in society. Especially like all of the, not all, right? This is never an everybody thing. It's just my experience, what I've seen out there, and I have seen a lot of different dating people out there talking about things. I actually specifically, if I see it come up on like a TikTok or something, I specifically pay attention to it now because I want to see what these guys are telling women to do and just see like if it's still as toxic as it was back when I used to read stuff and listen to stuff. So yeah, anyway, a lot of dating advice nowadays is very much about playing a game and not being who you authentically are. So that is one of the biggest problems. Like I would say a lot of the themes in the toxic dating advice that we are given, especially as so like from a woman's perspective, it's like the play hard to get thing, right? It's the oldest trick in the book. Be aloof, be mysterious, like act like you don't care. Whoever cares the least has the most power. Like those are the things that we're taught to do, right? When you're dating a guy, oh, like don't seem too available and, you know, don't text him back right away and don't always ask him when you're going to be exclusive and, you know, date the other guys so you're not focused on him. Like that type of dating advice is from a lack fear-based place, because if you go layers deeper into why you want that type of dating advice, right? Think about it like this. Okay, I don't feel like I am enough. It's either I don't think I'm enough, or I don't like who I am on some level, or I don't think on some level I'm worthy of being loved as who I am. So now I must modify myself. I must shrink myself, and I must show up as a different version of myself than I really am to get the guy that I like to like me. And then guys, don't forget about this. If you get into the relationship, you either have to keep up this act for the rest of your life or become the real version of you and hope that he likes that, right? Like it comes from a place of not truly loving who you are. It doesn't come from a place of being confident and secure within yourself. And I'm not putting anyone down. Like I literally did this my whole life, and it took me a lot of time and energy before I realized that I was doing these types of things for those underlying reasons. So that's one of the reasons why dating is really toxic, right? And so, and for men too, right? Like men have their own set of toxic dating advice that they are taught as well, right? Like don't just be with one woman at a time. Like you got to play the field. Be single as long as you can. Like be careful that they're going to take your money. Like just like weird, some of the male advice as from a woman's perspective, I think is so funny. And then for women, right? It's like the men and the women thing. Like men want to sleep with women right away, but if they sleep with you right away, then they're going to lose interest in you, right? And so the women are like, well, do I sleep with him or do I not? And if I sleep with him, is he going to lose interest in me? Like that is all of the, what I would call societal contagions that have made dating toxic. There's a lot of contagions and there's a lot of wounds that people are operating from that create this toxic dating advice that is low frequency. Does it work? Sometimes, temporarily. Low frequency things do work in some cases, but they are not. The difference between something that's low frequency and high frequency is that something that is high frequency is going to work in the long run, and it's also going to feel the best. It's going to feel the most expansive, the most loving, the most authentic, and just the most freeing, and just it's just going to feel right. Like if you want to do something in a way that feels really like from an integrity perspective, from an authentic way, like that is the way to go. High frequency is always going to be the way to go. And so something I started doing is realizing that, you know, after years of listening to this dating advice and quite frankly following it, I realized it was not getting me anywhere. It was attracting the wrong type of guys in a lot of ways. And then the guys that I did like that, you know, weren't necessarily that level of toxic, it would repel those type of men away. So the men I actually would probably be a good fit with, I would repel them away by doing this weird aloof type of act. And it wasn't getting me anywhere. And it wasn't who I really was. And so, moral of the story is that why dating has become toxic AF is because there is a lot of low frequency dating advice out there. And so if you want me to go deeper on that, I absolutely can on specifics. That's kind of the summary of that. There's a way that I figured out how to make dating high frequency, and I'll talk about that as much as I can here without making this a 5-hour long podcast episode. Maybe that'll be a webinar, which, speaking of, if you're not on my email list, highly recommend that you get on my email list, because I have a free membership called Sovereign Radiance Awakened. And it is basically a free membership that stores all of my online trainings that I host. You will be the first to know when I'm hosting another live training. I aim to do one once a month. Maybe they'll be more frequent in the future. We'll see. But get on my email list and you'll be able to get on these free online trainings. I go way deeper in there than I do on the podcast. Usually the podcast is like the first level of information, and then I typically go more advanced in the trainings. And then obviously if we work together one-on-one, I will go even more advanced with you there. That'll be the most tailored, unique, and most effective way to work with me. But the online trainings are phenomenal. I hosted one last month. It was Embody Your Lucky in Love Reality. And it was a add-on to my previous podcast episode where I talked about why affirmations don't work, the science and spiritual reasons as to why, and what to do instead. So I went deeper into that and talked about how our brain runs on various programs, and how I had the Unlucky in Love program, and how I switched doing the self-love and self-image healing work. And then I rewired my belief systems, rewired my past memories and identity and the ways that I operated and all of that to shift into a Lucky in Love program. And that is what completely transformed my dating life and made me a match to meet my soulmate, be in a relationship with him, and ultimately be married to him today. So highly recommend that. Training is still in my free membership, and I will be hosting another free training very soon. I've actually been ideating on the topic, and I think I'm getting a lot of really great ideas from this episode on what to do. So get on my email list if you haven't already. And now we'll drop that piece and go back into the podcast content for today. So besides low frequency dating advice, right, that you typically hear from the gurus or whoever, like someone, it's like the telephone game, right? It's like someone heard this and then they told this person and then they told this person and blah, 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 right? Just to kind of close out on that piece, but then I want to go into another reason why dating is toxic AF, and this is going to be a couple layers deeper. Dating advice is never going to actually solve your dating issues. It is literally just playing a game, and at the end of the day, you can't play Monopoly forever, right? You can play Monopoly for 4 to 6 hours sometimes, right? I don't know about you guys, but when my family likes to play Monopoly during a holiday like Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, Monopoly can go on forever, but at some point everyone gets tired of Monopoly. So you can't play a game forever. You can't build a lifelong partnership, a relationship, or a marriage on someone that you're playing low frequency toxic dating games with. So it's not going to solve your dating issues. It's literally just putting a Band-Aid on a problem and not going to the root cause. So more on that later. So the other reason that dating is toxic AF is because of societal contagions. And I kind of briefly just brought that up a few minutes ago, but essentially societal contagions, what that means is there are certain things in society that we are taught, and I like to bucket those. You've probably heard me talk about societal contagions before. I brought it up definitely on previous podcast episodes, but I usually bucket it into how we're raised. So typically from parents, but any type of caretaker, especially maybe you were watched by a grandparent growing up or whatever, like some way, shape, or form, how you were raised affected you. And also with that, right, it's typically that area of a societal contagion is more of like a generational trauma type of thing, right? Parents pass down beliefs that they got to you and so on and so forth, right? But the other piece of the societal contagions is, how we're taught to operate as a society. And usually we learn a lot of that through the school system is the most popular way, right? But also add in nowadays in the modern age, social media, right? There's so much stuff on social media that affects us that it has us take on lower frequency beliefs. It has us operate in lower frequency ways, and it has us just really being less and less of our true selves. And that is like, we need a whole episode about that. But ultimately, all of these societal contagions just really mask us from following our genuine heart wants. A lot of times, even when people are manifesting, I've been, guilty of this myself. A lot of times, we think we want something, but we really want it from an ego-based place or some type of wound. Something we want it because of how we think this external thing is going to make us feel, like it's finally going to make us feel worthy or enough or accepted or whatever, right? So a lot of times these societal contagions prevent us from being our authentic selves and doing things that we don't actually really want to do, but we feel like we have to do. And it just becomes a web of unfulfilling relationships as a result of that. And so to break that down even further, all right, so let's split it up into male and female programming. So like I said, it's going to be from one of these three things, right? Parents, caretakers growing up, school system, society. So I kind of touched on this briefly, but as women, right, we are taught to be a certain way, right? For women, we've been taught to center men. We've been taught that we need to look the most attractive we could possibly look, to be the thinnest we could possibly be, or, whatever. Sometimes it's the hourglass figure. Sometimes it's being really skinny. Sometimes it's, the Kardashian look or whatever, right? It's constantly changing, but there's always some type of beauty standard that we feel pressured to mold ourselves into, and we don't feel like we are enough unless we fit these societal beauty standards, right? And this gets magnified through the social media, the comparison effect, right? And a lot of times the motivation behind looking pretty enough, looking thin enough, and being attractive enough is because if we feel like we are not hitting those levels, we are not going to get a man. And if we don't get a man, then our lives are worthless, essentially, is what we're taught, which is not true. But we are taught that we must do all of these things and center our lives and our future around finding a man to be our husband and have kids with, and so on and so forth. Like, as women, our success in life is measured by if we are single, married, in a relationship. So that's kind of like high level a lot of the programming that we have as women with that. And, even if you go deeper into that, right, it also creates friendship issues because we're taught to look at other women as competition versus women lifting each other up. And, while that's not the case across the board, shows like The Bachelor and Love Island can pit women against each other in some ways to fight for the man. So societal contagions to be aware of. So that's kind of the women thing. And what I will also say is that there's deeper reasons why society wants women to center men, which is a story for another day. But I want you to think about this a little bit. I actually made a video about this a couple of weeks ago about Off Campus because love that show. But I love all of those types of shows. I was the biggest advocate for all of the rom-coms and all of those different types of lovey-dovey type of shows, like not even lovey-dovey, but just like the bad guy or the most wanted guy, like falling for a specific girl. And that's what I talked about in the off-campus video. If you're interested, I can send it to you, or you'll probably find it on, if you follow me on Instagram or TikTok, I posted it there. But part of the female programming, aside from like just social media, well, I mean, this is basically what I'm talking about. All right, we're back. Sorry guys, I can't find my tripod, so I'm using my sticky thing to hold my phone up for now. So, with the female programming, a big way that we are programmed to center men is through TV shows and movies, and now as well through social media. It's kind of like the thing that reinforces it, but think about it like this, right? So think about like how we grew up, especially if you're around my age. I think we kind of got it the most. I'm a 1995 baby, so millennial. We all grew up with Disney movies, right? And Disney movies teach you to center men. You're a princess. Like the story's the same song and dance. Like a man's gonna save you. A princess finds her prince. Like the Little Mermaid, right? She falls in love with Eric, and it's all about finding love with Eric. Cinderella is a maid until she meets a prince, and that changes her life. And Sleeping Beauty is asleep until her love comes to get her. Like, it's the same song and dance, right? So that from a very young age wires us. I mean, even Pocahontas, which is my favorite, all right? Pocahontas is literally vibing out alone, thriving, and then she meets this guy, and granted, it's a great song and dance, and there's a lot of great stuff, which I'll get into about why that relationship was a really great expander for both of them. I'm talking about, by the way, the Disney movie, not the actual history of Pocahontas. So just to be clear on that. So anyway, it's all about finding the man, and then you get the happily ever after. Once you find the man, you get the happily ever after. And that is what is ingrained in us at a very young age through these movies. So there's that. And then you have these other shows that amplify the wound of feeling like you need to be enough for a man and feel special from a man. And so I brought that up with Off Campus because the reason we all love Off Campus is, yes, on a higher level, the guys are hot, right? You're either a Dean type or a Belmont type. What's his name in the show? Garrett. His real name's Belmont, I think. You're either Team Garrett, Team Dean, or maybe both. I don't know. I like Garrett because I feel like he's multifaceted. I love a man with like a personality, like very like mental stimulation kind of vibes. But anyway, yes, we like the show because the guys are hot. But what we love about the chemistry with Garrett and what's her name? Wellesley? Hannah? Yes. What we love about their connection is it was unexpected, right? Like, he didn't like the cool popular girl, Kylie. He was the guy that never wanted a girlfriend. He was in his own lane. He was the guy that everyone wanted, but he didn't want anyone, right? And then he fell in love with the girl that you wouldn't expect, the nerdy girl, the quiet girl. And that's why we love those types of shows, like The Kissing Booth and Gossip Girl, like Chuck and Blair, because, you know, Chuck only loves Blair and he's like a bad guy, but he'll be good for her. And Damon and what's her name? Elena, right? Like Damon's the bad guy, but he'll be his best version for Elena because he loves her and she's special, right? So it's all those types of shows that, aside from just like finding happily ever after, which like every rom-com is like that. So think about The Notebook, right? The happily ever after, the true love, and even years later, right, she still went back to her ultimate true love because that was her key to happiness. Just like all the Nicholas Sparks movies just are right there for you. There's so many rom-coms and they all have the same theme. Once you get the man, you will be happy, your life will be complete, and everything's going to be roses and butterflies, right? So there's that. And then there's also the other shows I was telling you about how women, you know, a lot of times we're taught to not feel special. And when a man like a Damon Salvatore or a Garrett Graham makes us feel special, that is our key to feeling worthy, feeling enough, and feeling seen and special, right? So as a woman, this is all the programming we're getting. These are all the societal contagions we're getting. So whether we realize it or not, there are a lot of contagions that keep us motivated to find a man. And it's very distracting if you think about it. So before I go too deeper into that, like, it takes us it becomes our primary focus for life. And that's not fair to us because there are other things that are important in life, but also we should have the right to find a man from an authentic place and already feel special and enough within. And then you can ultimately, if you really want to find your divine union, that is the place you need to find them in, which is the key to all of the work that I do. But anyway, I wanted to make you guys aware of the societal programming that we have as women. And then I also want to talk about the societal programming as for men. And granted, I'm not a man, so I'm not going to know this at a level as deep as a man would really live and breathe this. But I know from what I've seen in my other relationships, being a person that had low self-image, low self-love, I had a lot of relationships that before my husband where I attracted men that had a lot of trauma in their lives and, really operated from the wounded masculine place because I was a match to be with those types of partners. A lot of men are programmed. I would say like the two main things that I notice is that they have to hide and suppress their emotions. They don't feel safe to really express their emotions. They feel like they have to have it all together all the time. And, they don't want to be seen as like a wuss or I don't know, whatever. Like they need to feel like in control all the time. So they don't want to show their emotions. And so they don't heal. There's so many men out there that are not healed because they never give themselves the space to feel things and to work through things because they think that makes them weak. And that's what they're taught a lot of the times. Not a full case. There are plenty of divine masculine operating healed men out there too. And then also a power complex. Men always need to feel like they have the upper hand. They're taught that they should have the upper hand in a relationship with a woman. I'd say also, I think that while women are programmed more to gravitate towards being in a relationship, men are more programmed to spend more time being single and like playing the field and dating a lot of women at once and not getting too close to anybody, not tying themselves down and things like that. So it's kind of like the opposite. Like women are programmed for the male gaze and to center men, and women and men are kind of programmed to be more avoidant, the opposite, to hold the power. So those two combinations create a very toxic dating environment for men and women to operate. And ultimately, this is a problem on so many levels because there are so many unhealed men and unhealed women trying to date from these low frequency archetypes that we were placed into. And ultimately, it does not fit together in a healthy partnership. And so everyone's running into issues with this when they are out there trying to date from a wounded place. The best way to date is from a whole healed place. And granted, healing is not linear. You're never going to be 100% healed, but you need to be at a certain place to, I would argue from my experience, like I have dated when I was at the lowest of lows with my self-image and self-love. And I've dated when after I did all my self-love and self-image work and healed myself. And even leading up to before I met my husband, I had such a more fulfilling dating life. I attracted so many more higher quality dating experiences, versions of guys, whether I knew them before or knew them after. Like they treated me differently when I perceived and treated myself in a higher frequency, more loving way. And then I would say too, another problem that aside from the societal contagions from social media and TV shows, our parents, we model a lot after our parents or our caretakers. And so based on how your relationship was for your parents, that's going to affect you. The way that they operate, whether they're together or divorced, like that is your first experience of operating. And I actually talked about this in my webinar a little bit, the Lucky in Love webinar I was telling you guys about. But like my parents, I wouldn't say that they have the most highest frequency dating relationship, but my grandparents really did for me growing up, and they watched me every day as I was a kid. So I did have their relationship as an anchor to show me what a loving high frequency relationship should really look like. And that was really, really helpful for me. And not everybody has that, which again is why I think it's so important to talk about this type of stuff, because you don't know what you're missing. Like if all you've ever seen is low frequency, toxic type of relationships, you're not going to know anything different. So it's really important that you're exposed, especially from a subconscious mind perspective and how our like the neuroscience and psychology of how our brain works. If we're not exposed, if we're not aware that there is a better way to be in a relationship, we're never going to go after that, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're missing if you've never experienced it. And on top of that, if you've never seen it modeled and you're so used to the toxic way of operating, then it's not going to feel safe for you to go after the more unfamiliar thing, even if it's healthier and happier. If it's unfamiliar, your brain will run from it. And so also I would say, based on the programming that you are given as a child, no matter what it is, right? Everyone has their own unique experiences. That creates your early stages of dating. On a more spiritual level, it probably has something to do with your soul lesson that you have for this lifetime as well, because we all have soul lessons that we come here with to master and grow and learn from in this lifetime. They're usually themes around self-love and self-image, but there's a variety of different soul lessons. So based on your experiences and also, the soul plan that your higher self has for you in this lifetime, you're going to go through different things, and that will be played out in relationships. So like when I brought up my high school relationship that hurt me really bad, I had a lot of strong feelings for him, but I felt like there was someone else he wanted more than me. Like I was the second choice. And that was kind of like the first big, like, that song, The First Cut is the Deepest. Like that was like the first time I really felt like in real time, I wasn't enough. And there were other people out there that were better than me on different levels. And I carried that in future relationships, which is why my future long-term relationship that I was in, I was a match to being cheated on. And then ultimately I became a match to a mentally and physically abusive relationship, which you've heard if you've listened to my previous relationship love life podcast episodes. But it builds. It truly does build like that. It all started with that first relationship from me not feeling special enough or worthy, and that grew into more and more intense, unfulfilling, toxic, and I don't know, just shitty relationships, right? Like it just grew. As you can see, like it started off just not feeling chosen, and then it became to not just not feeling chosen, but someone literally choosing other people outside of me. And then ultimately I was beating myself up mentally so much that I became a match for a physically and mentally abusive relationship and a partner. So the trauma that you have growing up and in your earliest dating experiences, that will carry and that will grow over time. And so going back to why dating is toxic, so many people are dating not doing this inner healing work, not working through those experiences that they had, not doing the self-love, self-image healing work. And so they can't fully improve, and they can't come to these relationships or these dating experiences from a healthy place. And so everyone's just bouncing off their shit with each other, and it's not helping anybody, right? We're going to move off of that because I talked about that way longer than I thought. So with all of this, right, I think the key is that dating has become toxic AF. I've went into why. So when it comes to what we really want as humans, right, which the reason I want to bring this up is because something that I've noticed that has happened with me, happened with a lot of clients, and honestly, I've heard this from friends before too, and I've seen it so much. And there was a specific conversation I was in with a client where she was like, it's hard for me to date if I just have this subconscious belief of not liking men. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And she's like, I just feel like I just don't trust them. And I was like, okay, well, why don't you don't trust them? She's like, well, I don't know. It just seems like all men have, motivations to use women or to cheat on them or whatever. Like, I just feel like I've constantly seen in my experiences, whether it's me or my friends, that all men lie and all men cheat and all men do these things. And so she had this thing where she had an underlying perception that men were bad. And I had this too. When I first got out of my abusive relationship, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I never, like, at this point, I never want to be in a relationship again because first I was cheated on and now I was in this abusive relationship. Like, men suck. And that became like, you've probably, as a woman, you've been in a circle where women are all like, men suck, men suck. Do you think that's going to get you anywhere? Like, and I say this with love because I used to do this. I have friends that have done this and I help my clients through this all the time, right? Like, yes, from a logical perspective, it makes sense. Like, you've been through these really shitty situations with men and you've experienced real shit where men treated you poorly. So, of course, logically, you're going to think, you're going to apply that as a stereotype, right? Like, this isn't the first time we've had a stereotype. You're going to apply that as a stereotype that all men suck and all men are bad. And if you think about it, that is a contradicting belief to what you want, because if you want a great man, you want a loving, supportive, honest, integrity-based man, if you think all men are bad, that is a contradicting belief to what you are trying to experience, what's your goal, what's your manifestation, whatever. You can't create a loving, quote unquote, good man if you think all men are quote unquote bad. So that was something that really inspired this piece about what men and women really want, because she had asked me, what do you think the source truth is on what men want? She didn't even ask about women, but they came through when I channeled it. She was like, what is the source truth on what men really want? And so in the spiritual world, I don't know if I fully really explained this yet, but when I talk about source truth, it means, because as a trained intuitive, I am an open channel to channeling other consciousness is. So I can channel my higher self, I can channel your higher self, I can channel souls that have passed over, like my grandfather that passed. I channel his consciousness all the time. He's on my spirit team and he's great. I love him. I could channel anybody, really, if I really wanted to. I could channel a living person's higher self or their human self or their ego self. Like, I'm an open channel to different consciousness, which, speaking of, I do offer free higher self channeled reads. So if you're interested in getting some clarity on your soul-led path, what your higher self wants you to know, I can also look into your energy field and see what your biggest blocks are and what you need to do moving forward based on the areas of life that you're focused on the most. I do offer, it's a free 10 to 15 minute audio message I will send to your email. So if you are interested in that, you can email me, first of all, at mariamanifest@gmail.com, or you can schedule on my website, I'll drop the link in the show notes, a complimentary alignment call. And so what will happen is I can do the reading for you, and then we can actually get on a call and I'll talk through what I channeled through, and you can ask like follow-up questions. So I'll still send you the audio channeled read, and then you can schedule that call with me and you can ask me any questions and we could talk through what came up in the intuitive downloads, the information that I pulled, and then we can go from there. So if you're interested, completely complimentary, let me know or click the link in the show notes below. Anyways, going back to that, while I can channel different consciousnesses, I can also channel source consciousness, which, use whatever term you feel most comfortable with. Source, universe, God. I like to use the word source because it's just the creator energy, because, God, in my opinion, has a little bit of a religious focus in the sense of, if you're Catholic, this and that, whatever, it can be a little bit misinterpreted. But I like saying source because I'm talking to the higher power, the source creation energy. And so anyway, when I talked earlier about how unconditional love is the highest frequency you can experience, right? The highest frequency state, consciousness, and also like your energy from an energetic perspective. That is where source operates from. And so when you talk about what is the source truth of something, it's because, if you're in the spiritual world, you will notice this. Things are very nuanced, right? Nothing is black and white. Nothing is, or I should say, nothing is black or white. Everything is gray. Everything is nuanced. Everything is this and that. It is both. It is positive. It is negative. It is good. It is bad. It is all. And so that can be a little bit tricky to really understand, well, what is really the truth, right? Because for somebody, all men are bad could be their truth, but that is not the ultimate truth, right? So when you say source truth, it's more of like truth with a capital T, like the ultimate truth of how the highest frequency information you could get and the truth of how the universe operates from is kind of how I would explain what the source truth is. So my client had asked, she's like, well, what is the source truth of what men and women really want? And so I channeled through with source and I was like, all right, well, what do they really want? And I realized that men and women want the same thing. Like if you strip away all the contagions, all the stereotypes, all of the traumas, the limiting beliefs, all of the things that are not aligned with men and women's true core selves, they want the same thing. As humans, we want the same things when it comes to a relationship, and that is to be loved, to be seen, to be understood, and to be supported. We want someone that we know has our back as we go through life. We want a person that we can always count on and that we can experience the highest levels of those amazing emotions with, right? The highest levels of love, the highest levels of fulfillment, of growth and expansion and passion and adventure and all of those things, right? Men and women all want that. They all want a partner that they can count on, that is loyal, that trusts them, that, they can be their true selves around, right? We all want that. It's not separate. Men and women are not separate in what we ultimately want out of relationships. It's only the societal contagions of what we are told to want, be, and do as men and women that separates us. So from a source truth level, we all want the same thing. And I think as if you are single or you're even in a relationship or marriage or whatever, if you are going to operate from a higher frequency dating, relationship, whatever type of mentality, you need to have that understanding. It's that it's not a competition. It's not you versus them. It is you both wanting the same thing. You're both on the same team and you both want the most amazing things for each other with each other. So that was like really the main highest frequency piece of dating advice I could share in this podcast today that I think is really, really important for people to understand. So we're already, it looks like, getting close to the hour mark. I really, really wanted to talk about, I have so many other things on here where I wanted to talk about more of the spiritual side of, the source truth on relationships. So something I really, really wanted to talk about is like, I started off going into the spiritual world in the manifestation world because I was motivated by an unfulfilling love life. It was my level 10s at the time. My pendulum swings where I was like, you know what, enough is enough. I need to make a change. Like I'm willing to do anything because of how much I struggled. I was at that place, that rock bottom place that we talk about. So relationships was my motivation to get into the spiritual world. And so between that, my psychology degree and my personal interest in understanding what makes men tick and women tick, because I wanted so badly to, meet my person and have the most amazing happily ever after love life, my real life rom-com, right, for myself. I learned a lot about relationships, lower frequency stuff up until my spiritual awakening. And then in my spiritual awakening, I started to learn more higher and higher frequency stuff. And so now, as I've had my second round of my spiritual awakening, I've gone even deeper and deeper. And as I've opened up my intuitive gifts and I'm really understanding, the source truth on things, the soul's journey, why we, as souls come to earth and what our higher self plans for us, right? So if you're interested in hearing more about that stuff, I have a couple podcast episodes on intuition and I have a higher self episode. And, there's going to be a lot more coming on the laws of the universe and, different things that we go through in life that we might not really understand why we're going through it, but from a spiritual lens, it will all start to make sense. That's why I love combining the science and the spirituality and explaining and really just understanding like what is the key to life, like why is everything the way that it is? Like I love understanding the true why behind why everything is what it is and how to really have that control over my own life. That was a huge motivation for me because I felt like for so many years of my life, I couldn't understand why things happened the way that they did. And I felt like I couldn't control my life. And I always, felt like I didn't measure up. So when I found manifestation, I was like, oh, you could be the creator of your own reality. You can control your own life. Like, this is insane. This is so awesome. So basically what I'm trying to say is on this deeper level of spiritual awakening, the more I understand the universe and how everything works and what conscious creation really is at the deepest levels, I now have even more understandings of why we value and focus on relationships so much in life. And the reason for that is, if you've heard me talk about this, you probably have if you listen to previous episodes. If not, you will hear it. We live in an inside out world, right? Like, everything that we are seeing in our external reality is a reflection of what's going on within. That is why self-love and self-image work and rewiring those beliefs, right? Switching from that unlucky in love program to the lucky in love program, like I talked about in that masterclass I was telling you about, that free online training in my free membership. Because I did all of those internal changes, I had created a different external reality, because the external reality is a reflection of the internal things going on within. We are all manifesting 24/7. We are always the creators of our reality. And so if we want true change, right? Not putting a band-aid over a situation, not trying to force and control it, but if you really want to get to the root cause and have authentic, fulfilling, permanent, positive change in your life, it needs to come from within. That is why I wanted to go deeper into the spiritual reasons that relationships are so pivotal for us. And one of the reasons is because relationships are our biggest mirrors. They are our biggest teachers, right? You think about it like this, right? When you're single, like single in the sense of you're not dating anybody, right? Like everyone's had that kind of hibernation era where they're not really dating, they're just focused on themselves. A lot of times that is the most peaceful time in our life because we have no one triggering us. Relationships are triggers. Even friendships are triggers. Parents are triggers. Relationships trigger us. But a lot of times, just with the draws that we have to love and relationships, partially due to the programming, relationships romantically are the most triggering in a lot of ways. And spiritually, our souls love that, because relationships being that triggering means that we're going to have a lot of obstacles, yes, but a lot of growth and a lot of upgrades and things like that. So that is such a big thing that I'm really starting to realize, is that relationships, they're intentionally designed to help you grow and become a better version of yourself. And a lot of times you will find that you've gone through really tumultuous relationships and maybe you weren't the best version of yourself in that relationship, right? I know I wasn't the best version of myself in that abusive, toxic relationship I was in, but I came out of that relationship a better person. I would not be the person I am today if it wasn't for going through that physically and mentally abusive relationship. That relationship changed me on a core level that I wouldn't trade for anything, because I wouldn't be the person I am today without that. That is what relationships are for. And so with that, on a spiritual, even more advanced level, there's a little thing called soul contracts. That's been fun to explore, because you'll start to realize that certain people come into your life for different reasons, right? Like I was a match to being cheated on in that other long-term relationship I told you about, and I was a match to having a mentally and abusive partner, but I had soul contracts with those people as well, because my higher self wanting me to get that growth, because it's important for what I'm doing now. And yes, I have a soul contract with my partner, but it's also interesting because if we're not in a place to be a match with the person we have a soul contract for, we could maybe mess up the soul contract, which is a really interesting thing, which is why, you're going to get to a certain time and place where, for example, if you're listening to this podcast episode, your higher self probably wants you to do the work so that you can align with that soul contract that maybe you're just not a match for right now because you haven't gotten to the place to do that work on yourself yet. It's really, really interesting when you start to dive into that stuff to see just how intentionally designed it is that you meet certain people and have certain relationships and they teach you certain things. And yeah, so that was something else I wanted to talk about. I can't talk about it as advanced as I would like today because I don't want to make this podcast too long. We're already over an hour here on my recording. So If you guys are interested, you want to hear more about soul contracts and how that applies to relationships, drop a comment below on wherever you're watching this and let me know, and I'll be sure to do a separate podcast episode about that. And then the last piece I wanted to talk about is, if you have been in the spiritual world, in the manifestation world, you have probably heard about the specific person manifestation type of thing, as well as the twin flame journey. And a lot of that is just also privy to the fact that the spiritual perspective of relationships is that they are your biggest mirrors, your biggest triggers, and your biggest opportunities for growth. For so many people who feel like they've experienced a relationship with their twin flame, you would probably see that a lot of people that met their twin flame might have been activated by them. There's a higher frequency term for twin flame. There's definitely a higher frequency way of explaining what that really is on a source truth level. So if you're interested, I can talk about that at a later time as well. I can talk about soulmates and what makes people compatible and things like that, just really giving the spiritual and the science perspectives of all of that all in one. If you guys are interested and want to hear a future podcast episode about that as well, let me know. But a lot of times when it comes to those type of relationships, they are so triggering, and you really, a lot of times people don't end up with that person for them because they don't do the full evolution of healing work where they're full and whole and complete within themselves. And that is something I really want to help other women and men as well achieve. Like, the people that really are committed to reaching their full potential in life, it kind of just comes back to what I was saying earlier about my podcast episode with Talia, is that love was the catalyst, but it was never about love. And that is really what your divine union is ultimately about. So that's really the spiritual high frequency perspective on what dating and relationships is really all about. Is, you know, it's not, the relationship's not the end all be all. It is the catalyst for your growth. It is never about love as the destination. It's about the work you do on yourself to become the highest version of yourself. And then getting your divine union is just like your carrot in front of the horse. It's literally just your reward for doing all that work, doing the work on yourself and having that spiritual fulfillment. It doesn't even need to be spiritual, but just having that wholeness within yourself where you really feel enough and you really love yourself unconditionally at the deepest levels, and you just really get to that place where you don't need anyone else to feel complete. That's when you become a true match for a divine union. And so that's kind of an introduction, a very high level introduction to the spiritual perspective on divine union type of lifelong partnership, or really more serious type of relationships. I know the beginning half of this was much more of a high frequency dating focus. I can definitely go deeper into divine union, more spiritual and science, deeper perspectives on those more special and powerful magnetic type of relationships, like I was saying with soulmates and divine union and compatibility and all of that stuff. So if you guys are interested, let me know. You can leave a comment below on wherever you're watching this. But overall, I hope you enjoyed this. If there's anything you have questions on, feel free to let me know about that as well. Subscribe to my email list so that you can get on the list for those free online trainings that I do, where I go even deeper than I do here on the podcast. You can get the replay for my previous trainings, and I also have a library of meditations, breath works, future self activations, a lot of really good stuff in there. So you definitely don't want to miss that. And then if you are interested in the 10 to 15 minute higher self channel audio and a follow-up call with me, completely complimentary, send me an email at mariamanifest@gmail.com, or you can schedule a call with me in the complimentary alignment section on my website. Otherwise, I hope you really enjoyed this podcast episode. Thank you to all of those that come and listen to my podcast, that you follow and subscribe to this podcast, and you rate this podcast 5 stars. It is a great show of appreciation for me to allow me to keep showing up here, to change your life, to change others' lives, and keep growing this podcast to help change more and more lives for the better. If you know someone that would really benefit from this podcast, please share it with them. Word of mouth really, really helps me, and it would be a great show of appreciation. So I would love that. And otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next episode or in my free membership. All right, talk to you later. Bye.